Supreme Commander Xerix of the Thalassian Imperium stalked across the bridge of the dreadnought Inevitable Conquest, his scaled skin shifting through shades of confident amber as he studied the holographic display of the unremarkable solar system. The third planet, Earth, glowed blue-green before him, ripe for taking. "Computer, display military capability assessment," he commanded, talons clicking against the metal console. A cascade of data streams materialized around him. Earth's various weapon systems, vehicles, and military installations appeared as red markers across the globe, alongside capability ratings that made Xerix's upper mouth ridge curl in what passed for a Thalassian smile. "Pathetic," he muttered to himself before addressing the watching Imperial Oversight Committee through the quantum link. "Honored Oversight, I've completed my assessment. These humans possess primitive technology, fragmented political structures, and no unified military command. Their most advanced weapons rely on chemical propellants and crude nuclear devices that couldn't penetrate even our scout vessel's shields." Oversight Commander Krell's massive holographic head loomed large in the communication array, her scales shifting to a skeptical blue-gray. "Your confidence seems excessive, Xerix. Remember the Arcturus campaign." Xerix's skin flushed a defensive purple. The mention of his one delayed conquest stung his professional pride. "Arcturus was a statistical anomaly. My analysis is thorough. Look at their history. These humans constantly fight amongst themselves." He gestured dramatically, bringing up footage of human conflicts. Earth armies firing primitive ballistic weapons at each other, aerial vehicles dropping chemical explosives, naval vessels exchanging missile fire. They're tribal, territorial, and utterly predictable. Our conquest simulation algorithms give us a 99.8% probability of complete subjugation within one standard rotation. As the senior officers dispersed to prepare the invasion fleet, Sub-Commander Vakis, Xerix's analytical second-in-command, approached with a data tablet. Unlike the commander's confident amber, her skin rippled with concerned blue patterns. "Commander, I've identified an unusual statistical anomaly," she said quietly. "The humans exhibit extraordinary tactical variation. Their historical warfare doesn't follow standard evolutionary patterns." She displayed a chart with an off-the-scale vertical line. Most conquered species develop 3 to 5 primary combat doctrines throughout their history, but humans, over 10,000 distinct combat doctrines. Xerix read incredulously. "Clearly a categorization error. I verified it personally," Vakis insisted, her voice steady despite her commanding officer's dismissal. "They fight differently across regions, eras, and even within the same conflicts. It's unprecedented." Xerix dismissed her with an irritated flick of his ceremonial cape. "All primitive species fight over resources and territory. These humans will be no different from the 17 worlds we've already brought into the fold. Prepare for departure." As Vakis left, her skin displayed concerned patterns that the glory-seeking Xerix chose to ignore. In the ship's database, a pulsing alert highlighted Earth as the only cataloged species with unpredictable combat evolution as a defining characteristic, a warning that would go unheeded. Xerix turned back to the view screen, watching Earth rotate slowly in the darkness. His scales shifted to the deep gold of anticipated triumph. "Computer," he commanded, "begin invasion countdown sequence." The Thalassian armada emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, -214 warships arranged in the Imperial spearhead configuration that had broken 17 civilizations before. Earth's orbital instruments barely had time to register the invasion before Xerix's first strike began. From his command throne aboard the Inevitable Conquest, Supreme Commander Xerix watched with predatory satisfaction as the tactical display blossomed with thousands of weapon signatures. Kinetic impactors screamed toward military bases, while electromagnetic pulse devices targeted communication networks. Below, Earth's major cities glowed with targeting markers. "Standard subjugation protocol," Xerix announced to his bridge crew, his scales shimmering with anticipation. Simultaneous decapitation strikes against all command structures, followed by demonstration attacks on 10 population centers. Survival probability for targeted installations, 0%. The view screen showed Earth's primitive aircraft attempting to intercept Thalassian fighters. The resulting one-sided slaughter made even seasoned Thalassian officers uncomfortable. Human naval vessels fired missile after missile, only to watch them detonate harmlessly against energy shields. Ground-based weapons exhausted themselves against impervious Thalassian armor. Their resistance is exactly as predicted, noted the tactical officer with professional detachment. Conventional forces employing predictable defensive patterns. Human casualties at 87% in engagement zones. Within 6 hours, the command center received the first capitulation signals. The United Nations Security Council requests immediate cessation of hostilities and offers unconditional surrender, announced the communications officer. Xerx's scales flushed triumphant gold as he turned to Vegas. "See, Subcommander. Exactly as predicted. Begin Stage 2 occupation protocols." On the main view screen, Thalassian dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere, landing at strategic locations across every continent. Imperial soldiers marched from their vessels in perfect formation, advanced weaponry humming with deadly energy. At the deployment monitoring station, Vekas frowned at incoming data streams. "Commander, I'm detecting unusual resistance patterns," she reported, bringing up a tactical map showing red dots dispersing from conventional military bases. The humans aren't behaving according to standard conquest response patterns. They're abandoning conventional formations and dispersing into smaller units. And Xerx replied dismissively. Most species concentrate their remaining forces to protect government centers or attempt counter-strikes against our vessels. These humans are doing neither. Xerx waved a taloned hand. Expected behavior when command structures are compromised. They're disorganized and ineffective without centralized leadership. The occupation forces will eliminate these isolated pockets within days. In the command center's data pit, a junior analyst's skin flashed alarmed patterns as she watched thousands of targeting vectors disappear from their screens. Human military units weren't surrendering. They were deliberately going dark, abandoning technologies that could be tracked and vanishing into the landscape. Unlike any species the Thalassians had encountered, these humans seemed to have prepared for the loss of their command structures, executing pre-planned protocols for continued resistance, even after conventional defeat. What Xerx failed to understand was that human military doctrine had evolved through millennia of fighting other humans, creatures with the same biological limitations and technological capabilities. They had developed warfare that thrived without direct command and control. And now, as the Thalassian occupation forces established their command nodes in captured territory, thousands of small human units were already adapting, observing, and preparing to strike. 2 weeks into the occupation, Xerx paced the command deck, his scales cycling through troubled patterns of blue and green as regional commanders delivered their reports. The data was inconsistent with all previous conquest experiences. Supply convoy Alpha 37 destroyed outside the human settlement designated Atlanta, reported Regional Commander Thrix, his image flickering in the holographic display. The humans employed improvised explosive devices buried beneath the roadway, followed by precision attacks on our vulnerable points. They specifically targeted the power distribution nodes on our assault vehicles. How could they know our vulnerability points? Xerx demanded. Unknown, Supreme Commander. But more concerning, Thrix's transmission briefly dissolved into static before resolving. We've lost 3 forward operating bases in the past 12 hours. The attacks bear no tactical similarities. Different methods, different targets, but coordinated timing. Similar reports flooded in from across the planet. In the mountains of Afghanistan, Thalassian patrols disappeared without sending distress signals. In the forests of Finland, occupation forces found their sensors jammed by devices cobbled together from civilian electronics and salvaged Thalassian components. In the Brazilian rainforest, indigenous tribes were employing poisons that specifically targeted Thalassian respiratory systems. Vakis entered with a security team escorting a captured human. The prisoner, despite obvious injuries, maintained defiant eye contact with Xerix. This specimen was apprehended attempting to infiltrate our secondary command post in their North America. Vakis explained, activating a holographic replay of the human's capture. Watch their equipment. The footage showed the human wearing a crude but effective bodysuit that reflected Thalassian scanning beams, rendering them partially invisible to sensors. Their weapons included modified Thalassian energy pistols reconfigured for human hands. They've already developed countermeasures to our low-level energy weapons. Vakis continued, displaying more footage of human fighters wearing reflective armor. And they're repurposing salvaged components from our damaged vessels with remarkable speed. A subordinate officer approached with a data tablet. Commander, we've intercepted their communications. They're sharing technical knowledge across their resistance cells. This schematic of our shield modulation frequencies was transmitted globally through a primitive but effective encryption system. Xerix slammed his taloned fist on the console. Impossible. They shouldn't even understand our basic technology, let alone our advanced systems. Nevertheless, he adjusted the conquest timeline on the main strategic display, extending the subjugation phase by 4 standard cycles. Increased the technological restriction protocols. All damaged units must be vaporized. We'll starve them of opportunities to study our systems. The human prisoner suddenly laughed, a sound that made the Thalassian scales bristle with instinctive alarm. Something amuses you, primitive? Xerix demanded. You're already too late, the human replied in roughly accented but understandable Thalassian, shocking the command staff. We've been watching you since you entered our solar system. Every ship you lose, every soldier that falls. They're textbooks for us to study. What Xerix couldn't comprehend was that humans had evolved as persistence predators and adaptive problem solvers with a unique relationship to technology. While Thalassian civilization advanced through careful, methodical improvement of existing systems, humans progressed through creative leaps, improvisation, and cross-disciplinary innovation. The resistance lacked central coordination, but was paradoxically more effective because of this unpredictability. 1,000 different approaches evolving simultaneously, with successful techniques rapidly shared through hidden communication networks. By the 3rd month, Supreme Commander Xerix stood before the Imperial Oversight Committee's quantum projection, his scales ashen gray with stress. The casualty reports displayed on the surrounding screen showed an exponential increase in Thalassian losses. Explain how a pre-spaceflight species is inflicting 12% casualties on Imperial elite forces, demanded Oversight Commander Krull, her massive form dominating the communication array. The humans employ unconventional warfare, Xerix replied, struggling to maintain composure. They avoid direct confrontation, where our technological superiority would prevail. Instead, a subordinate officer burst into the command chamber, interrupting the high-level communication, a breach of protocol that would normally result in immediate disciplinary action. Commander, the humans have penetrated our battlefield network. Impossible, Xerix roared, his scales flaring crimson with rage. Their computational systems are primitive. They couldn't possibly decipher our quantum encryption. The main display activated, showing a human resistance broadcast playing on Imperial frequencies. The image showed captured Thalassian soldiers, equipment being disassembled by human engineers, and tactical data being extracted from Thalassian combat units. This is a deception, Xerix insisted to the now silent Oversight Committee. Vakis stepped forward, her scales patterned with the blue-white of scientific analysis. I've confirmed the breach, Commander. They didn't break the encryption mathematically, she explained, displaying high-resolution footage of humans in a makeshift laboratory. They physically disassembled our devices and reverse-engineered the hardware. Observe. The footage showed human scientists working in what appeared to be a repurposed underground parking structure, methodically taking apart Thalassian communication nodes. Instead of attempting to understand the software, they were mapping the physical pathways of the quantum processors, creating crude but functional interfaces between their own technology and the alien systems. This facility was destroyed by orbital bombardments 6 hours after this footage was captured. Vicus continued, but we've identified 27 similar operations across the planet. It appears they prioritized understanding our technology over immediate military objectives or even their own safety. Oversight Commander Krell's voice cut through the silence. You've lost control of your own communication network to primitives. Xerix, how do you assess this development? Before Xerix could respond, the intelligence officer activated another screen showing captured footage from a human resistance cell. A Thalassian scout vessel was being systematically disassembled in an abandoned warehouse, with different components distributed to specialized teams. The humans weren't just studying the technology. They were modifying it, improving it, adapting it to their physiology and manufacturing capabilities. Most disturbing was what the humans were doing with the information. Psychological warfare specialists were creating compelling propaganda showing Thalassians retreating, wounded, or captured. Unlike other conquered species who viewed the technologically superior Thalassians with fear or awe, humans portrayed the invaders as vulnerable, fallible, even ridiculous. The humans have weaponized our own image against us, Vicus explained. Our troops report increasing psychological distress when encountering these materials. She displayed battlefield footage showing human resistance fighters anticipating Thalassian patrol routes and standard response patterns. They've studied us more effectively than we've studied them. They can predict our tactical responses because we follow established imperial doctrine. They have no such constraints. Xerix, his 3 centuries of military training suddenly seeming inadequate, had no doctrine to counter an enemy that treated information as their primary weapon and psychological victory as more important than territorial control. As Oversight Commander Krell demanded answers, warning lights flashed across the command deck. 17 more Thalassian communication hubs had just been compromised. 6 months into the occupation, Supreme Commander Xerix stared in disbelief at the intelligence briefing. On screen, leaders from nations that had been bitter enemies for centuries, North and South Korea, India, and Pakistan, Israel, and surrounding Arab nations, were shown in secure underground meetings, planning coordinated strikes against Thalassian occupation forces. This contradicts everything we know about human sociology, Xerix said, addressing the senior intelligence analyst. Explain. The analyst, a specialist in conquered species behavioral patterns, appeared equally baffled. Our pre-invasion intelligence identified 147 active conflicts and over 500 significant geopolitical tensions that should have prevented global cooperation. Yet we're seeing unprecedented alliance formation. Even religious extremists are coordinating with secular governments they previously sought to destroy. The tactical display updated to show simultaneous attacks across 6 continents, each employing different methodologies, but striking at exactly the same time, despite the Thalassian communication blackout. Their historical data showed centuries of intertribal conflict, Xerix argued during an emergency session with Imperial Command. Their cooperation defies all sociological prediction models. The probability calculators gave less than 0.01% chance of unified human resistance by this stage of conquest. On the massive view screen, Oversight Commander Krell's expression betrayed growing impatience. Your invasion force has been reduced by 22%, with no path to complete subjugation. Explain this failure, Commander. Before Xerix could answer, alarms sounded throughout the command deck. Display screens showed simultaneous breaches at 3 Thalassian forward bases, one in the Andes Mountains, one in the Siberian tundra, and one in the Australian outback. Coordination across hemispheres, muttered Vicus, studying the attack patterns. They're using our own timing protocols against us. What the Thalassian models had fatally failed to account for was humanity's unique response to existential threats. The intelligence archives held countless examples of bitter human enemies forming alliances against common foes. From the historical data about World War alliances to the unification of competing tribal groups against colonial powers, the pattern was clear, except to Thalassian analysts who considered such behavior irrational. "Show me the attack methodologies," Xerix ordered, still searching for some pattern he could understand and counter. The tactical holographs displayed the 3 simultaneous assaults. In the Andes, the attackers had used high-altitude infiltration techniques developed by Andean indigenous resistance fighters, combined with electronic countermeasures designed by Silicon Valley engineers. In Siberia, the assault teams had employed Arctic warfare tactics originated by Finnish forces during Earth's Second World War, modified with Chinese drone technology. In Australia, Aboriginal knowledge of the terrain had been combined with modified Thalassian energy weapons captured in previous engagements. They're combining disparate military traditions, Vakis noted, her scales showing patterns of scientific fascination despite the dire military situation. Each human culture developed distinct combat methodologies against other humans. Now they're sharing them, creating hybrid tactics we've never encountered in any previous conquest. The intelligence officer approached with new information. "Commander, we've decrypted portions of their communication network. The humans have established a global resistance command structure that deliberately avoids centralization. Regional commands operate independently, but share tactical insights through a redundant mesh network." At that moment, a junior analyst rushed forward with a security alert. "Commander, we've detected unusual movement patterns around our 7 primary command centers." The tactical display shifted to show human forces gathering in carefully concealed positions around the Thalassians' most important installations. Their movement patterns and equipment loadouts suggested something unprecedented. "They're preparing coordinated offensives against our command infrastructure," Vakis confirmed, her voice dropping. "This isn't just resistance, Commander. They're attempting to seize the initiative." 9 months into what was supposed to be a 1-month conquest, Supreme Commander Xerix stood in the secure technology assessment chamber aboard the inevitable conquest, surrounded by captured human weapons and equipment. What he saw defied Imperial understanding. "Explain this," he demanded of the chief science officer, pointing to what appeared to be a Thalassian phase rifle, but subtly altered, with crude human components grafted onto its elegant form. The science officer activated a display screen showing the weapon's internal structure. "The humans have modified our standard-issue VX-7 phase rifle to bypass our own armor," she explained, her scales shifting to troubled purple. "They've reversed the polarity of the quantum stabilizer and added a frequency modulation derived from their primitive radio technology. It's inelegantly effective." "Test it," Xerix ordered. A robotic arm lifted the modified weapon and aimed it at a standard piece of Thalassian battle armor. The weapon fired. A beam of energy that should have been harmlessly absorbed by the armor instead punched a clean hole through it. "Impossible," Xerix whispered. Vakis entered the chamber, her normally composed demeanor visibly shaken. "Commander, we've confirmed the humans have penetrated our equipment standardization protocols. They're producing these modified weapons in quantity." She activated the main display, showing battlefield footage from 18 locations around the planet. In each scene, human resistance fighters wielded modified Thalassian weapons against Imperial troops. The casualties were unprecedented. "And there's worse," Vakis continued, bringing up communications intercepts. "They're using our own battlefield coordination protocols to feed false intelligence into our command network. 3 battalion-level units were led into ambushes yesterday because their navigation systems received falsified terrain data." The chief science officer brought forward another captured device, a crude amalgamation of Thalassian quantum technology and human silicon chips. "This device intercepts our secure transmissions and subtly alters the data packets. It shouldn't work at all. But somehow they've managed to create a functional interface between technologies separated by thousands of years of development." Xerix examined the device with growing horror. "How many of these are deployed?" "Unknown," replied Vakis, "but our communications integrity has dropped to 42% across all occupied territories." What Xerix had fatally misunderstood was the human approach to technological development. The Thalassian path to their current technological supremacy had taken thousands of cycles of carefully managed incremental advancement. Each new technology underwent exhaustive testing before field deployment. Improvements were implemented only after comprehensive safety protocols were established. Humans, facing extinction, had no such luxury or limitation. "Show me their research facilities," Xerix demanded. The display shifted to surveillance footage of captured human laboratories. In what appeared to be a repurposed underground train maintenance facility, hundreds of human scientists and engineers worked feverishly with salvaged Thalassian technology. They appeared to be following no standardized protocols, instead working in small teams using wildly different approaches to solve the same problems. "Their methodology is chaos," noted the science officer with professional disapproval. "No quality control, no standardized testing procedures, minimal safety protocols. They're suffering horrific casualty rates from failed experiments." One screen showed a human test subject screaming as a modified energy weapon exploded, taking the volunteer's arm with it. Instead of stopping the testing, the humans simply moved the injured person aside and continued with another volunteer. "They're accepting a 40% casualty rate among their technical personnel," Vekis reported, her voice hollow. "It's allowing them to compress technological development cycles from decades to days." Retruish. One standard cycle into the invasion, Supreme Commander Xerix stood frozen in the ruined command center of Outpost Dominance, once the primary Thalassian headquarters on Earth's northern continent. The air reeked of scorched metal and alien blood. Around him, engineering teams worked frantically to restore basic systems while medical units treated the wounded. "Report," he demanded of the surviving tactical officer. "Coordinated human offensive," the officer replied, her scales pale with shock. "Simultaneous strikes against 37 command installations across the planet. This facility suffered the worst casualties. 82% of stationed personnel are dead or incapacitated." Vekis approached, limping from a wound sustained during the attack. "I've analyzed their assault methodology, Commander. It was unlike anything in Imperial records." She activated her personal datapad, showing tactical reconstructions of the attack. "They used our own orbital platforms to provide targeting data," she explained to the stunned command staff. "Somehow they gained access to our surveillance network and reprogrammed it to identify vulnerabilities in our defensive grid." The display showed waves of human attackers using a bewildering variety of approaches. The first wave deployed electromagnetic pulse weapons specifically calibrated to our shield frequencies, followed by ground forces using a combination of modified Thalassian weapons and their own primitive but effective explosive devices. The third wave, she hesitated, used biological and chemical agents specifically designed to target Thalassian physiology. "Biological weapons," Xerix hissed. "Even they consider such tactics war crimes against their own kind." "They appear to have discarded such constraints," Vekis replied grimly. "Analysis of the agent shows it was engineered to attack specific proteins unique to our respiratory system. It would have required detailed study of Thalassian biology, likely from captured personnel." The medical officer approached, interrupting with urgency. "Commander, we've detected an unknown pathogen affecting the wounded. It appears to be a modified version of a human disease called influenza, altered to target our immune response." Xerix stared at the data in horrified fascination. Throughout his military career, the Imperium had conquered through methodical, predictable force application, overwhelming technological superiority applied according to established protocols. This had worked effectively against 17 previous species because those species had played by similar strategic rules, valuing minimization of their own casualties and adhering to recognizable conventions of warfare. Humans recognized no such limitations. "Show me the global situation," Xerix ordered. The tactical display, functioning at minimal capacity, showed catastrophic losses across all theaters of operation. In the region humans called Southeast Asia, guerrilla forces had employed environmental warfare, deliberately flooding valley systems where Thalassian bases were established. In Eastern Europe, human resistance cells had poisoned water supplies with compounds that caused hallucinations in Thalassian troops. In North Africa, they had developed sound-based weapons that exploited the enhanced hearing of Thalassian soldiers. Most disturbing were reports from the Middle East, where human fighters had seemingly sacrificed entire settlements to lure Thalassian forces into ambushes, accepting thousands of their own civilian casualties to eliminate hundreds of Imperial troops, a casualty exchange rate that defied all rational military calculation. "Their approach is completely irrational," Xerix muttered, struggling to comprehend the human mindset. "They're destroying their own infrastructure, contaminating their own territories, sacrificing their own populations, all to inflict disproportionately small casualties on our forces. Yet it's working," Vakis observed quietly. "Their willingness to accept casualties and collateral damage exceeds anything in our strategic models." 18 months after initial contact, Supreme Commander Xerix stood on the command deck of the retreat vessel Humble Dominion, watching through the viewscreen as Earth diminished behind them. Of the original invasion fleet of 214 warships, only 68 remained operational, many of those heavily damaged. The rest had been destroyed or worse, captured intact by human forces for study and replication. The door to the command deck slid open, admitting the 7 members of the Imperial Oversight Committee, who had arrived to personally oversee the final withdrawal. Their scales displayed the formal patterns of judicial assessment. This was not merely a debriefing but a tribunal. "Supreme Commander Xerix," began Oversight Commander Krell, her voice echoing through the suddenly silent command deck. "You stand responsible for the first failed conquest in 4,000 cycles of Imperial expansion. Explain how a pre-gravitic civilization defeated an Imperial conquest fleet." Xerix's career and possibly his life were forfeit. Yet as he faced the committee, he felt a strange clarity. "I assessed their technology, not their methodology," he admitted, his voice steady. "I catalogued their weapons, not their willingness to use them. I analyzed their resources, not their resolve." He activated the main display, showing compiled footage from the 18-month campaign. "We understood everything about human civilization except humans themselves." The footage showed desperate last stands where human soldiers sacrificed themselves to delay Thalassian advances by mere minutes. It showed civilian populations turning their homes into death traps for Imperial forces. It showed captured Thalassian technology being disassembled by children too young to understand the radiation poisoning they received in the process. "Every species we've previously encountered adhered to recognizable cost-benefit calculations in warfare," Xerix continued. "Humans operate on different principles. When facing extinction, they prioritize inflicting maximum damage on their enemy regardless of the cost to themselves." He brought up the final confrontation that had forced the Imperial retreat, when Thalassian High Command had authorized the deployment of planet-killing weapons as a last resort. Expecting immediate surrender, the humans had instead launched a desperate counterattack. "They fired every remaining nuclear missile at our fleet," Xerix explained, the footage showing hundreds of primitive but effective nuclear weapons rising from hidden silos across the planet. "Not tactically, but in a single coordinated barrage designed to overwhelm our defenses through sheer quantity." The screen showed the desperate battle as Thalassian point defense systems struggled to intercept the barrage. Many missiles were destroyed, but enough reached their targets to cripple the fleet. "They sacrificed entire regions of their own planet to radiation exposure," Xerix explained. "They accepted casualties that no rational species would tolerate, all to ensure our defeat." Oversight Commander Krall made a decision that would reshape Imperial policy. Establish a quarantine boundary around the Sol system. No Imperial vessel is to approach within 2 light-years under any circumstances. As the Humble Dominion accelerated to light speed, Xerix drafted what would become known as the Xerix Protocol. the containment rather than conquest of species, demonstrating human-like warfare characteristics. The official Imperial assessment concluded with a warning. Humans do not fight to minimize losses or preserve resources. When threatened with extinction, they will sacrifice anything to ensure the enemy faces the same fate. The only winning strategy is not to engage.